May Mother Saraswati bless us all and help us to make this phase successful. Now, I would like to request our respected principal sir to give his blessings for the program.
A very good morning and greetings to all. On this occasion of inaugural session of STTP on Applied Computational Fluid Dynamics for Renewable and Hydraulic Engineering sector, I invite all the participants to A.D. Patel Institute of Technology, a constituent college of CVM University. ADIT College was established in year 2000. We have 8 UG branches and 6 PG programs. And we have NB accreditation for the second term. I hope during the next 5 days, you will be hearing from different esteemed experts. Today we have, during the inaugural session, Mr. Om Prakash Singh from BHU IIT Varanasi. And I hope all of you would benefit from this program. With this, I offer my support for this event and wish that coordinators will successfully conduct this event. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to ask our respected HOD sir to give his blessings.
Very good. I welcome you on STTP on Applied Computational Fluid Dynamics for Renewable Energy and Hydraulic Machine sector. Mechanical Engineering Department of ADIT, established since 2000. We have 3 PG programs: CAD/CAM, Renewable Energy and Thermal Engineering. Means the department is, as principal sir said, 2 times NB accredited department, and department has invested more than 4 crores in state-of-art laboratories, and we have a various domain expertise in the fields of cryogenics, heat and mass transfer, CFD, rapid prototyping, robotics, and other emerging areas. So with the short note, I welcome you all, and I also welcome Om Prakash Singh for the first session on the CFD analysis. And with that, I once again wish the coordinators to inaugurate this session.
Thank you. Now I would like to request Dr. Mitesh Shah sir to introduce our esteemed guest today. Over to Mitesh sir.
Very good morning to one and all present in this session. This is the second phase of AICTE AQIS sponsored short-term training program on computational fluid dynamics, focusing in the area of renewable energy and hydraulic machine. And as Principal Sir has mentioned, today we had a esteemed speaker from IIT Varanasi, formerly known as BHU, Dr. Om Prakash Singh. I will be happy to introduce him. Dr. Om Prakash Singh is currently working as an Associate Professor, Mechanical Engineering Department at IIT Varanasi since July 2016. He received his MS and PhD degree from IISc Bangalore. Prior to joining IIT Varanasi, he was working as an assistant professor at IIT Mandi and as a senior manager at TVS Motor Company Private Limited, Bangalore. There he was working as a in the department of R&D. He has 16 patents, 78 plus international, national journal and conferences publications to his credit. He has delivered many talks and keynote addresses in the area of computational fluid dynamics at various institutes in India and developed many new technologies. He has published 3 book chapter also. Dr. Singh is a reviewer of 8 journals in the field of energy, renewable energy, International Journal of Heat and Mass Transfer, Journal of Applied Fluid Mechanics, SAE International, etc. He has supervised 7 PhD scholars, out of that, and 9 master students and 40 BTech students. So thank you, sir, for giving us time. Now I request Om Prakash Singh, sir, to start his presentations.
So thank you very much for your nice introduction, and I also thank the organizer for conducting such a.
Not audible.
I'm not audible. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So, as you all know, the industry today are looking for potential candidates who can do simulations using computers. Okay. And fortunately, we are not producing that much skilled manpower in the area of where actually the industry need more experts on CFD, FEM, and one reason being that not much focus is there in our curriculum, especially in BTech and MTech, though experiments are also needed, but side by side, the computer skills are also to be built for the companies who actually need this kind of skills. I'll share some of my experiences later on, but first let me share how to share. Okay, present now. Entire screen. So can one see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I have 1.5 hour session to cover a lot of stuff. So I hope it will be useful to our participants. So innovations can also be done through simulation. Okay, unlike our general belief that only through design and experiment simulations can be done. But again, simulation plays a big part in development of product and processes. So mostly I'll focus on the pre-processing part, and what is the reason behind that. I'll also be discussing that. Now, see, in the conventional method of production, I'm talking in an industry scenario. Okay, so it starts with a design. Okay, it doesn't matter which industry you are, the design is a must, starting from a small watch industry to as big as truck and the aerospace industry. Design is a must. Okay, so earlier you used to design through the projectors and hand, but now those are all been replaced by this CAD tool. CAD tool in a sense, AutoCAD, ProE, and all those things, SolidWorks. The design is a must. Then after design, earlier, this is I'm talking about in 80s and early 2000, where the method of production was to design first, then go for prototypes with some in design we used to do some other hand calculations which we are taught in the textbooks. Then after prototype we go for testing, and in testing we find out the failures, and again go and modify the design and change the design, again come back for the prototypes, do the testing, and we are satisfied after a number of trials that there is no more failures, or at least 70, 80, 90% you are confident. Then you go for mass production. Okay, so this is how it used to work early in 80s. Okay, but now the things have changed, and changed on a large scale. So how the modern method of production works? See, design is anyway it's same earlier process and the new process. So it has become more on a virtual environment, not using the drafters and all things. Use computer tools, design softwares, and after design we do the CAE. CAE is nothing but it's a general term of computer aided engineering. So whatever you do through computers, it's called computer aided engineering. So here there are various methods. So one of them is also CFD, then finite element method, and then there are many the boundary element method where you go for noise and all things, and so many other processes and tools are there. So in CAE you look for all the design related issues, and then change the design and come back to here from the CAE result, because CAE is not CFD, FEM, and any other method. They are tools to take decision. Okay, so if you cannot take a decision in industry, then there is no point in doing CAE. So CAE will help you taking a decision from which you can actually modify the design. So use CAE, go for design again, come back to do CAE, and then you are done with all the your model and analysis. Then come back to prototypes. Then prototype you go for testing, and again finally mass production. Okay, now see, the loop is, earlier the loop was between design and prototypes. Now it is between design and the CAE in computers. See, these are all virtual environment. We design the product. Our 60-70% of our design is freezed at the CAE level only. Whereas earlier, while doing the mass production, the design iteration used to happen between the test design and prototypes. And by this introduction of this new CAE methods, basically the life cycle of a product, from starting from the concept idea till the mass production, have reduced drastically. So to give you a scale of reduction, see, earlier it used to take, let's say you are producing a car. So let's say it used to take, let's say 4 to 5 years. Okay. Considering all the design concepts, now slowly then it came to, let's say, about 2 years. Now you can do with CI help. Now one can come by 12 months only, less than 12 months you can launch a product, if in industry is having skilled CI professionals. Okay, but unfortunately in academia we don't generate skilled people who are well versed in CI tools. Mostly we are now in our academia, we are stuck with teaching, let's say, fluid mechanics. Okay, and plus experiment, some little bit of experiment, and this is done. And CFD is basically it is taken as something as a rocket science, which only after it comes your 8th semester as a elective, or in some colleges it's offered and some colleges it is not. But with the advent of computer and the tools have become so easy, then this method, the CFD and the fluid mechanics should be taught together in the same course. And for that, the faculty will have to upgrade their skill level, where they can teach both the fields during the same course. Okay, so with CFD we can do optimization, or for that matter we can do optimization with the finite element methods on structure. But basically one should not confuse with FEM and CFD. See, once somebody says FEM, so it is basically the first thing comes in the mind is that it is a structural thing. But no, finite element method is one of the way to solve the CFD, solve the governing equations, mass, momentum, and energy, which is built in the conservation equation. CFD basically use finite volume method. Of course, I will not be covering anything as such. To integrate the equation. In FEM, the process a little bit different, but again FEM, CFD are just a method to solve a differential equation. That's all. So the FEM can also be applied to the fluid. FEM can also be used in the structural part. CFD can also be, the finite volume method can also be used to solve a structural problem. It can also be used in solving the fluid problem. Okay, but generally FEM is preferred for certain kind of problem, structural problem, because of their efficient way of handling the displacements and all the things. Whereas finite volume and CFD methods are generally used for fluid related problem because they conserve the energy in the entire flow field. Okay, so you see why we use the CI so early in the design process is, you see here, this is the time frame where you slowly move on various development phases, and initially this is the number of design alternatives. Is there an alternative figure of that? Maybe I will explain with this. So initially at the concept stage, okay, here your product knowledge is very small. Okay, we don't know much about the product, but as we go on further testing and design modification, okay, so our product knowledge will be more and more on that. Okay, but the opposite, the more the knowledge you have less design freedom. So and during the later stages of production, you will have very less freedom to do design modification. Okay, initially at the concept stage you have a lot of design freedom, and the same it comes with the cost. Now see, when I come back, So the cost of doing changes during these later stages of the product development is huge. Design of cost is huge, mostly because here most of your processes are set. You have already given orders for different parts. Those suppliers have already set their manufacturing process to supply the parts. Any changes during later stages, actually it is not good for the company image, and also in terms of costs, the cost involved. Okay, so here only the industry is preferring initially where you have a lot of design freedom without any incurring cost. And CAE is mostly used, of course you can use CAE here also for troubleshooting and other things. But initially the concept design, okay, the concept design part comes during the initial stages where you have a lot of freedom to make design changes and implement and see what will happen, all things. So here CA engineer play a big role, okay, in the product development. So when the fresher, the graduate from the colleges, they hardly have any experience. So this is the one of the reason the industry don't prefer the freshers. But one can ask the question that unless they work, where will get the experience? That's the simple question. But while working in the industry, I realize that even if industry is willing to hire the fresher, but the problem is it takes them about 3 years to give training on these tools, CA tools, they or any other related stuff. For industry, it takes 3 years to train them properly. Okay, so after 3 years, an individual can actually start contributing to the growth of the company. But the problem is after 3 years, the person who has got this training for 3 years, he actually now thinks that he deserves more, and he will write everything in the biodata, whatever training he has got, and he will switch over. So the industry don't prefer a fresher because they leave after some year. Okay, they'll change the company for many reasons, and one is the salary, because now they learn everything. So now if these years can be reduced in the academia itself by giving them proper training, only then we can bridge the gap between what industry need and what we need. Industry need and what we are actually training them. In fact, the main purpose of proposing the engineering graduate, so they can do some engineering work, as simple as that. But many of them have not been aware. That's the unfortunate part. And when I'll go to the extent that many even not aware how to operate a proper operating system, how to rename a folder, how to change, how to install. I'm offering a CFD course. There are a few candidates who don't know how to operate a laptop. Now, wow. So that's digital illiteracy. Literacy is a must for the coming generation, and especially in this corona, where everything is now moving from your office to the house. Digital literacy is a must for everyone. So spend a lot of time with your computer, doing this, then doing this, install, uninstall. Only then you will have more free hand in doing a lot of other stuff. Okay, and this is one of the reasons, if you're not well versed with the computer, then learning the software is a remote possibility. Okay, so when you do CFD, so what we need to run a CFD model is, as I said, so there is some pre-processing technique. You need to design the CAD, okay, computer-aided design. For in academia, we hardly deal with some we deal with mostly with simple geometries. But when you go to industry, the geometry and the problems become more complex. Okay, so there after CAD generation, we go for mesh generation. So this is a must in the CFD process, and for most of the industrial problem, 80% of our time, okay, 80% of the time is basically it will go into just setting up your CFD model. Okay, just pre-processing the CAD, then go for mesh generation. I'll also talk about how to generate good quality mesh. Okay, and then post-processing takes not much time. Of course, independent now our computational resources have improved a lot, and with experience, so this post-processing time has been reduced drastically. Okay, since 80% of the time goes into our pre-processing part, so I'll be focusing on more the mesh generation pre-processing technique, so the audience can make a guess what it needs to be done and what needs to be learned to do or develop a good CFD model. Okay, so now why meshing is done? Let me explain and what is the importance of meshing. So when there is a pure surface or a CAD model, so basically it is having an infinite number of points. A surface can have infinite number of points. Okay, and the degree of freedom here. See, I'm written here is 6. Basically, I use the same example to teach a finite element model where the degree of freedom or the unknowns. So here you can think of the degree of freedom as the number of unknowns. So at each node, suppose there are, let's say, 3 equations: one conservation equation, one momentum. Basically, there will be 3 momentum equation, and if you are solving, let's say, for energy equation, there will be one more unknown temperature equation. So 3 momentum and 1 temperature equation, 4. Okay, so you have U, V, W, and T, the 4 unknowns. Of course, pressure will also be there, but we use continuity equation to iteratively solve the pressure. So minimum at each node, when you solve a fluid flow, a heated fluid, you need minimum 4 unknowns at each node to be solved. So the degree of freedom, and in that case, it will be 4. So basically, here I want to say the number of degree of freedom. So if the number of nodes keep on increasing, so the degree of freedom also keep on increasing. So when there is no division, no meshing, so basically it will have an infinite number of equations, because we solve each equation at each node. Okay, so this is impossible when you don't mesh. But on the other hand, if you have a finite number of nodes, okay, and you have finite number of unknowns, so the solving the total equation also becomes limited. Okay, and it all again depends upon the resources you have. Now one can think of instead of using a very fine mesh. Fine mesh means this spacing between the 2 nodes. Okay, to get better result, the spacing can be reduced by using a small grid size. So in that case, the number of equations also be very large. So your computer will slow down, because it will solve each equation, each node you have to assemble in a matrix. Then you have to solve some special algorithm. In CFD, we call TDMA, tri-diagonal matrix algorithm. Okay. So again, so there is again a compromise between the number of nodes we use and our computational resources. But there is one more issue. So the one issue is, one can argue how much nodes and element, what is the element size, how many total nodes will be there. So those, because there is nothing set and hard and fast rule that what should be the element size, how many number of nodes one will use. Okay, so the what we do in our research or even we do in industry is to test go for this is called a grid independent test. Okay, so here here what we do, so for a given, let's say you check for a variable, let's say this is the number of grid sizes, okay, number of grids and some result. Result maybe it can be a temperature, it can be a Nusselt number, it can be anything. So slowly, if you keep on increasing the grids, what will happen is after some time it will become flat. So there is no variation. So here so at this point, from this point onward, you can assume that further increasing the grids is not changing the result. So that point actually or that number of elements you can use further for your next level of analysis and post processing. So to reach that, you have to change the number of grids, keep changing here from here, and slowly you will reach a number of grid where you can assume that or maybe there will be a slight variation of 4%, 5%. Beyond that, there is not much variation. So you can select that number of nodes to present your result. Now, and why we do grid grid independent test is basically, see, the physics remains same, mass, momentum, and equation. So the same problem, if you are sitting in India, if you're not doing this grid test, so one will represent let's say a result X, okay, and other person should sitting in America, and and if he takes a grid, some other grid, he'll for the same problem he'll represent a result, let's say Y. So this actually is not is going to help the scientific community or for your product development. So ideally, if you are using the same problem or similar problem, so one will go for a first grid independent test. So when you write a CFD paper or the best first thing which you have to report in your paper is that your results are independent of number of elements or grids or whatever. They're same. And nomenclature is same. Okay, so that you have to do first. Okay. Now one more. So doing grid meshing is, so the first purpose of doing mesh is to capture the geometry. Okay, so you should capture the geometry, and the second purpose of doing the mesh is to capture the physics. Okay, so the mesh generation does dual stuff. So first of all, I'll show you how, if mesh is not done in a proper manner, so it will distort the geometry first of all. So make sure that you use the minimum element size in such a way that your geometry is first captured, number one. Then once geometry is captured, then capture the physics. Then what does it mean? Capture the physics in a sense. Let's say there is a flow over a flat plate, okay, and the flow is flowing like this, and this is your flat plate, okay. Now from the fluid mechanics point of view, there is a term called, let's say, boundary layer. Okay, so what it will do is, so there will be a velocity gradient near the boundary. Okay, and beyond that there will not much change. So here in this small region, to capture the physics of, there is a capture of physics, capturing the physics for, let's say, change in sudden change in velocity, or it may be a temperature. The mesh, this region has to be very, very fine. Okay, and basically we prefer a quad mesh in 2D or a hexahedral mesh in 3D. Okay, so and it should be very fine, and the rest of the area, it can be coarse. It is not a big deal. But the area near the wall, because of the fluid is having viscosity and the no slip condition, we call it in CFD, it's called no slip condition. So the velocity nearly near the wall becomes 0, and slowly it develops and become reach the velocity near the high velocity near the core. So near the boundary layer, you need to define the mesh in such a way that you should be able to capture the geometry in a capture the physics in a better. So mesh refinement, you have to develop proper strategy where to refine and where to keep it coarse. Okay, so now one can ask why I will keep somewhere coarse and somewhere refined. I'll simply use a very fine mesh everywhere. Of course, you can do. Okay, so but again you have to pay the price of high computational time. Okay, but if you do a proper thinking and develop a strategy where you put a very coarse mesh. Also I think I have 1 hour time to show all those stuff. So if you do proper strategy, so you can get results very fast, especially in 2D simulations. And see, in academia mostly, or in those who are doing research, always try to think out of box. Okay, there's no hard and fast rule that a given set of problem will be solved by a given way, what is given told in the literature. It's not. For example, there is a problem of, let's say, a solar air heater or a PV panel, and if the entire research community is doing, let's say, in a particular way, or let's say are doing a 3D model, developing a 3D model, but one should always think to convert your 3D model in such a way that you can actually finally get you can do end up doing simulation into a 2D problem. So you can convert somehow by some assumptions and some other technique into a 2D. So your 50% of the problem jo hai, your life will become easy instantly. 3D takes a lot of time and effort and money and resources, and especially when you are working from home. So 3D is a very costly process. And even if you, let's say, you are doing 3D, then you have to do a proper meshing strategy where which location you need a very coarse mesh, so that you don't end up putting a more mesh at the places where it's not a critical region. And you should and sometimes it happen, so wherever you needed a very fine mesh, and instead of that you are doing a very coarse mesh. So that way basically you are not optimizing the resources. So first thing, you think that your 2D problem should convert into 3D problem should go to 2D. Let's say even in industry, of course I have solved a lot of complicated problems which usually people do in 3D. So I have converted them into 2D. Of course there were a lot of criticism initially, I am doing all this that, but finally when end results came, so you feel very nice from within. Okay, and even industry, let's say General Electric, G is a company, they develop, they are into now a lot of fields, and they're initially their main business model in aerospace. So they even today there is a group who first do the simulation in the 2D models. There is a group, first they'll do hand calculations, okay, initial designing. Then after initial designing, then it will go to the design, will go to a group who does only 2D simulations. Okay, then after months of 2D simulation, then finally they will 1 or 2 design which they think requires a 3D, then they develop a 3D model and for to check everything that whatever is done in 2D and the theory is fine. Okay, so always go out of the box. Okay, it's always pays in long term if you think out of box. There's no hard and fast rule that you solve a problem in a particular way. That's where your challenge of thinking out of box comes into place. Okay, so as I said, the purpose of doing meshing is also to capture the geometry. So geometry, in a sense, let's say this is your geometry, and for the sake of representation, let's say if you use 3 triangles, so we are only capturing here only 41% of the given area. Now the 4 lines, so the number of the percentage capturing increases, and slowly if you keep on increasing, basically these are the these lines are nothing but this grid size. Okay, we CFD, we call it, this is a shell, and this is called a node. Okay, so the, if you keep on increasing the number of nodes, okay, so you are basically going to capture the geometry in a better and better way. So as the number of node increases, your the area which we capture also increases. Okay, so so before I go to show some demonstration, so there is also called element quality in CFD. So when you are using a triangular element, ideally we prefer it to be 60 degree. Okay, this kind of elements are also fine up to some extent. So the one side can be a maximum of 2 times, or maybe a 2.5, or some cases we use 3 times. In boundary layer we use 40 times. So like as I said, the elements in boundary layer are basically a quad element in 2D. Quad means quadrilateral, or in 3D it become a hexahedral, a brick. Okay, in some software, in Fluent, if you're using, they call, I think, inflation layer. And if you're using, let's say, software like Stars ACM for CFD, they call it a prism layer. Basically, they are all dealing with the boundary layer. And in other regions, apart from boundary layer, so ideally we prefer element of uniform square. Okay, up to 4 times stretching is allowed, 1:4 ratio. Okay, and some little bit distortion also is allowed. Instead of 90, you can have a 60. But if you are doing a mesh in such a way that the angles and the stretching is more, then what will happen is your model will not converge. Okay, convergence in a sense, though when you run a model, so continuity and with iteration. Okay, with iteration, and maybe here it can be continuity, it can be energy. So slowly with iteration or time, it should come down. Your schedules should come down. And ideally we prefer order of 10 to the power minus 4, depending on the problem. -4, -6 is when your convergence reach to up to that level, then you can say that your model is converged. But in some cases, some student will come and they'll report it will go like this, and it will start it will do like this, keep changing, and it will fluctuate, it will never come down. Okay, so the first thing you should look when there is a convergence issue is to your mesh and mesh quality. Okay, then you should look for some other stuff, like selecting a suitable turbulence model, or it is a laminar problem, or you have applied proper boundary conditions or not, or sometime you need to check the time step, or a steady shot. Those things will come later. But the first things when you have a convergence problem is always look for the element quality. Okay, this is the basic. This is the founding block of your CFD model. The first mesh comes, then boundary conditions come. So you should look for generating a quality mesh whenever you develop a model, or whenever you enter into this convergence problem. Okay, so also I'll show you that how mesh quality will distort. Okay, so there are some terminology to measure the mesh quality. So one is called the skewness. Okay, and basically skewness is nothing but in, let's say, in a quad element, if you draw midpoint of the one quad element and the other, and the angle formed between the two angle, ideally it should be 90 degree. Okay, if it is a square. Okay, but some deviations are allowed. Okay, and it should be preferably less than 40 degree. So that are inbuilt in software nowadays. It is now inbuilt, so where you can just one click you can actually check. Okay, then as I said, aspect ratio. So aspect ratio is the maximum length, okay, divided by the minimum length. Okay, so 1:4 some you allow to some extent, and in boundary layer we go for 1:40 also. In boundary layer is possible, because in boundary layer the flow is aligned along the wall, so there it will not have a much problem if you use this one. And usually the software, if you are developing a boundary layer mesh using a software, so it is inbuilt in such a way that it will have that much ratio. Otherwise, what will happen is, if the number of elements, if you cannot have this much stretching, then you will have to put a lot of mesh near the boundary layer to capture even for a small or simple problems. So this takes care of all those things. Okay, so ideal value should be 1. Okay, and how to get this ideal value to 1, or ideal value of, for example, if you go for skewness, the best way to use a small element or grid size. I should use grid element, usually using FEM, but again the one element or shell, a small grid size. Okay, so if you use a small grid size for a given surface, so automatically the aspect ratio will approach 1. As simple as that. You do not have to worry. But when there is a differential meshing, in a sense, you are some locations, some surfaces definition such that it will require fine meshing, and some requires coarse meshing. So there you have to be careful. We allow 1:4 to some extent to make up the transition zone. If you go for 1:10, 1:20, then your element will automatically distort. Okay, and there is one more element quality check is a warpage. Okay, so ideally warpage to let's say there is a to make you understand. So ideally our element should be rectangular and on a plane. But if, let's say, if there is a curvature, let's say there is a sphere, and you are trying to capture this geometry, so what will happen is, if you are putting a mesh from, let's say, here to here, so ideally since this mesh is trying to capture the geometry, so although it will also actually change, it will curve. So basically the warpage is nothing but is a degree of the curvature it is taking, or ideally deviating from the plane. So ideally it should be 0 in most of the scenario, but there some variations are allowed. Okay, so there are similar, there is a Jacobian, ideal value is 1. Okay, basically the shape deviation, how far it deviates from the original shape. Okay, so to drive home a point, so see, this is the boundary layer. See this this video, I hope you must have seen in your fluid mechanics course. So the white color is nothing but the hydrogen bubbles generated by putting a electric wire in the fluid, and if you pass the current, so it will and you make the flow in horizontal direction, so it will generate uniform bubbles. Okay, now there is a surface, the white color which is visible is a surface which having some roughness. So because of this roughness, the fluid will basically form a boundary layer. You can see from here, and actually going to the your this is the U infinity. Okay, and in this small region, so basically this is the boundary layer. So here there is nothing much change in from here and here and to here to away from the wall, the velocity is same. So if the velocity is same, you can see this shear stress tau, which we study in this Newton's law of viscosity, mu, let's say del u by del y. Okay, so basically it says the gradient, or there is a change. Okay, this derivative nothing but gradient. So this gradient is basically 0 here, because everywhere in velocity is uniform. So only in the boundary layer there is a change in gradient. Okay, so we need to when you do a CFD, you have to put more effort in this region. Okay, rest of the region can be have a coarser mesh. If your mesh is like this, so it can be like this. So it doesn't matter if it is you are putting, because velocity here and here they are almost same. It's not affected by anything else. Okay, but whereas in the boundary, so you have to put very close nodes, so that you should be able to capture this variation. So most of the resources is basically we put in the boundary layer. Okay, so I will not go much into detail. So before I go for some demonstration, so I will explain why or what are the fundamentals problem we study in heat transfer and fluid flow. Now just imagine, just think, you must have studied heat transfer course, fluid mechanics course, and or some related courses. The purpose of just hold up. Any question?
Hello, sir. Please unmute your mic, sir.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay. Now see, the purpose of studying the heat transfer and fluid flow is only two. Now you will be surprised that you have read such a thick book of fluid mechanics, heat transfer, then how it can be only two? There are various chapters, is not it? Okay, so let me show you and how these only two things are there in the even in CFD which we study. Now there is a plate and there is a fluid over it, flowing over it. Okay. Now, what could be the purpose of studying this plate? This plate can be anything. It can be a plate of a surface of an aeroplane. It can be surface of your laptop. It can be surface of a PV panel. It can be anything. Okay, this is a general a flat plate. Now, when there is a flow over it, the first thing which you should know that how much force, what is the net force exerted by the stream on the plate, or in other words, I can write how much force we need to keep the plate in its position. So we call it basically drag force. Of course, drag and lift that connected. So this is the basic purpose of studying the fluid mechanics. So your entire fluid mechanics is devoted to this force. Now one can say how it is possible. You have studied all this fluid statistics. You have studied fluid dynamics. You have studied all shear stresses. You have studied all pressure drop. Just think, you can convert these forces, this pressure drop, losses, everything can be converted if you know the how much force or shear stress. If you know shear stress, you can know this pressure drop, because you can connect the pressure drop or the losses, or you can for that matter, you can all the losses in the system can be identified, or in one form or the other, or there is a skin friction coefficient or blah blah, all we study. They're all, so at the end of the day, our entire focus is only one, this part. How much force or stresses. So whenever there is a fluid flowing over the plate, because of this differential velocity along the plate, we will have different stresses will be developed. Okay, and because of this stress, we go for we study all this, and this all pressure drop, losses, blah blah, and the entire fluid mechanics is now books divided into to get only this. So one chapter will be devoted to let's say boundary layer flow. One chapter will be devoted to the Hazen-Poiseuille flow. One chapter will they're all same. Okay, just think in that, think a little bigger. Now the second purpose of studying the heat transfer or your CFD is to how much if the fluid and plate is at different temperature, so how much change in heat transfer will happen from fluid, either fluid to the surface or surface to the fluid. This heat transfer. Beyond that, there is nothing else. Your entire heat exchanger, heat transfer, fluid is now devoted to only this. Again, the applications and its variations are there in when we study Nusselt number, then some other temperature and all things. But these two is the entire crux. Okay, of studying this fluid heat transfer. Now let's see. Then what it you need to learn then in CFD. Let me so to calculate the drag forces. So shear stress into area is the force, and heat transfer nothing but heat flux into area. It is width into length. So this is area. So these two, if two are known, all stuff in your entire fluid heat transfer can be derived. So what we don't know is the shear stress. The shear stress and how much heat is transfer or changed. Now to get the shear stress, you need to have this velocity gradient. And to calculate heat transfer, you should know the heat transfer coefficient. So these are the two basic unknowns in CFD or your heat transfer or in general fluid flow. Now these things, now if you scale it, let me see. So this length, so this change happens only in the boundary layer, only in the boundary layer, so where there is surface, near the surface. So this del u by del y, so this changes from 0 to delta, let's say in the boundary layer. So this is delta, and when y, when at the point when it's delta, so your velocity is u stream, so it will reach the velocity of the free stream. So this changes, u changes from, let's say, u to u infinity, 0 to 0 near the wall, and finally in the core of the flow, the free stream velocity. So basically you can express this by u infinity by delta in terms of scale of, in a scale analysis, u by delta. So to know shear stress, what is needed? Mu, I'm putting an order of magnitude scale, u infinity by delta. So what is known? Your fluid property is known, free stream velocity is known, at what velocity it is entering the system. What is not known is your boundary layer thickness. So if, let's say, there is no viscosity, for ideal fluid there is no boundary layer development, and for that matter your entire study of all these stresses, losses in the system, entire fluid mechanics chapter vanishes. Okay, so if you don't know this delta, you cannot calculate anything. Either a shear stress first has to be, you cannot calculate shear stress. You cannot calculate shear stress, you cannot calculate pressure drops. If you don't know pressure drops, you cannot design your system. So and in CFD, in the pre-processing stuff, the entire focus is to capture the boundary layer. Again, I'm focusing more on that. Then what it needs to in heat transfer flow? Do we need to capture the boundary layer? Can anyone from the audience, how will get the heat transfer coefficient? Because this H is not known. So when there is a flow over a flat plate, or let's say for that matter there is a flow in a pipe, we can define velocity, you can define property, you can give boundary conditions on the wall, or but how will calculate H? H कैसे पे मिलेगा? Can anyone, those who can anyone have a thought on this, how this H is calculated? Okay, so let me answer that. Now you know how this shear stress or pressure drop or boundary is calculated, because you once you capture this geometry, the delta, then only then you can calculate shear stress. But how to calculate H? It doesn't figure anywhere. It's not even not known. Just in case there is a wall, and if you feel that you need to give a, let's say, a boundary condition on the wall, it can be a natural flow or some, so you can give a heat transfer of 5, 10, 20. That is outside. But inside the wall, when there is a flow over a flat plate or a pipe, on that wall, the software calculates its own heat transfer. We don't give H as a boundary condition inside the flow, because you don't have any control. You cannot give in the flow domain or near the wall. It will automatically calculate. So how to do? So let me explain how this meshing is. You have to be very careful when you do meshing near the wall. Is to let's say near the wall. Doesn't matter what kind of wall it is. In the flow domain, near the wall, there will always be conduction first. ये आपको याद रखना है. Why conduction? Because of the no slip condition, the fluid is at rest. Okay, and there is a small region in turbulent flow. The different viscous regimes are there, where or sublayer or buffer layer, all we call it in turbulent flow. So there a very small region will have only conduction, because the fluid is not moving. Okay, and after some distance, the flow, the effect of velocity you will start feeling near the wall, away from the wall, a little bit distant. So whatever heat is conducted through the wall has to be taken by the convection. There is no other way out. This is the only way it can be done. So first near the wall it has to be conduction, and then it has to go by the convection. Of course, here can be also conduction plus convection, both can happen, but majority of the heat transfer near the wall is a dominant mode of heat conduction is heat transfer is conduction, and the dominant mode of heat transfer in the core region of the flow is convection. So in conduction, what is the our formula? You know, K del T by del Y. This is a Fourier law. Okay, so this heat conducted should be equal to heat H delta T. Heat conducted is equal to heat convected. So how will calculate? So in order of scale magnitude, this delta T, like this is del U, basically is U infinity. So basically this delta T will be the difference between the wall fluid temperature. So this will be T0 minus T infinity. Okay, and this is delta Y, the thing but 0 to delta T. This is called thermal boundary layer. Okay, so how will calculate H? Then this delta T and the delta T will basically cancel out. So your heat transfer coefficient is nothing but K. I'm not using this sign. So order of magnitude is K by delta T. So to calculate the heat transfer coefficient, so if you want your model, CFD model, to predict correct heat transfer from fluid to the solid or solid to the fluid, you should be very careful to capture this thermal boundary layer near the wall. Okay, and again for normal fluid, let's say air or water, mostly what happens is our thermal boundary layer and this hydrodynamic boundary layer, they overlap mostly, unless otherwise if you are using a, let's say a highly conducting fluid, a liquid metal, so there your thermal boundary layer and hydrodynamic boundary layer will differ to some extent. So for a liquid metal, thermal boundary layer will be very large. So basically they conduct heat fast, so their effect of heat from the wall to the fluid will be very large. So you can adopt a different strategy in meshing those which region and up to how long. And for normal fluid, most of our research where we use mostly by using air and water as a heat carrying medium. So there the boundary layer, and so if you are refining for a fluid, then you should also take care of your heat transfer phenomena. So you to get heat transfer coefficient, again you need to refine your mesh near the near the wall. Or in other way, I can say that if you don't predict the thermal boundary layer in a proper way, so you are then you are not doing the proper justice to your CFD model. Okay. So if you don't know this, so you don't know heat transfer coefficient, as simple as that. So your entire the heat transfer which we study will not yield proper result, okay, in CFD modeling. So you should be careful how or where to put your mesh. I'll be I think I don't have much time. So I have already covered different boundary layer. I'll not go much. So let me directly go to the to show you some demo. Okay. So let's say so I think I don't have much time. So let's say a simple flow. So what kind of strategy ideally we should have? So that I want to tell you. Here, this is a simple 2D geometry, and there is a flow from inlet to outlet. Okay, and you want to develop a CFD model of this. Okay, so when you can get the geometry, of course, but how to do the meshing? Okay, so ideally if you think, let's say, before doing any CFD, what one will think is fluid will go here first, directly hit the wall. Okay, then it will hit this wall. Okay, and it will come back here. Okay, this will be the general thinking. But again, that is not the way where the fluid behaves. Okay. Just a minute. Okay. So without worrying about thinking how to do the meshing, first simply one has to go and use same coarse mesh without thinking about boundary layer, thinking about where to refine the mesh. Okay, and do the first simulation. Okay, which will be rough or partially correct, not 100% correct. So if you do the simulation here, let's say I have done the simulation. Now see how the fluid behaves. So it's much more different way which we thought. So fluid basically it has a tendency to take the shortest path. Okay, so it will go this way, and there is instead of fluid is not striking this wall, even though the fluid is coming horizontally, it's not striking. So what it's doing is, since most of the fluid is rushing here on diagonally, so there is a recirculation around this region. So fluid is rotating here, and the same way the fluid is also rotating here this region. Okay, so you should develop a mesh which will capture your flow behavior. So at the first instance, that will not happen. Okay, so in second iteration, once you seeing the fluid flow, come back again and change the mesh. Okay, so let me show you in software. So here I have already opened it, otherwise it will take time. So now see, I have also divided this surfaces where I need to put a more fine mesh. Okay, so here ideally your flow is, you can see if you go here, so the bulk of the fluid in this region, they are not changing their so almost it is uniform. Okay, so what you see is the gradient here, this region, yahan se yahan tak. So here is the change in velocity, and also so there is a gradient here. Near the core there is no, almost you can see by seeing the length of the vector, it basically says the fluid is almost at rest. Yeah, nothing happens in this region. So you need not worry about this central, but you can refine here. Okay, also you can see near the, because of this reverse flow, so near the wall, so it develops a quite high velocity. Okay, in both the here in this region, here you can see this velocity. So based upon the first flow, first simulation, you can actually do the refinement. Okay, so let me so since it's a 2D problem, okay, so without so you can, there are as I said, so there are quad element, so you can use quad. Triangular element is very fine. Triangular element is preferred near the regions where there is a more reverse flows. Okay, let's say behind the cylinder, So you can put a very fine triangular mesh where it does the job of capturing your wake region. Okay, quad is better. It does near the boundary layer, or the flow is somewhere is more streamlined in a location where those meshes these quad meshes are needed in those kind of location. But at this point, doesn't matter what we are using or what mesh you are using. So you can select, let's say, at the first instance when you come, you simply in the first simulation should be your without worrying about any quality or any convergence, simply, and you have to mesh. Okay, this is a coarse mesh. I'm using a quad. So because of some geometry partitions, it's using its own algorithm to do the meshing. So what I'll do is, this is looks very coarse. So you can simply then next go a further refinement. Okay, and if you are so even in this case, it's trying to keep the mesh somewhere. It's automatically refining without my control. Okay, and software is taking its own decision. And if you are happy with this quad mesh, then you can do the first simulation. If not, then you can change it to triangular, and also you can do the mesh. Now you see here in this case, since there is a I have already done areas and to where to partition the surfaces. So the triangular mesh is doing a better job of putting a uniform, keeping a uniform mesh. Okay. Otherwise, if somebody instead of that, let's say if you use instead of 5, let's say I use 20. Okay, and a quad mesh, a bigger element size. Okay. So now you can see, as I said, in some regions. So this quad is already distorted. Okay, and it is beyond our limit. Some triangular element, so you can see here. So this shape has already gone. So this element may create your divergence a problem, because this is not okay. Okay, in some locations also you can see here. I hope it is visible to you all. So this shape has changed. So as I said, if you go for element quality, you will see that a lot of bad elements, and here there are provisions, and for that matter, all software will have provision to check the mesh quality. Okay, so this way you have to let me check. So if you go, this is the mesh and quality index. So if I click on the quality, now you can see on the left hand side, it's showing that aspect ratio is 2% failed. Okay, now let me zoom it out. Okay, the color basically it tells these element qualities are not good, which you need to manually correct it. Okay, so you can manually, in a sense, place a node. Let's say if you drag a node like this, see how the quality is changing, and further taking the quality deteriorating. So this quality is now this becomes better. Okay, now this element, if let's say I'll zoom for you to see, this is the quad element, which is actually gone. So it is a very tedious job. So as I said, what you should do to avoid this problem is to, let's say I'm coming back, I'll delete element, and again to avoid this problem, you initially you take a little finer element. So the quality will be better, as I said. So let me, instead of 20, same quad element, let's say I will use let's say 5. Okay, and I'll select all the surfaces and say mesh. Okay, now the number of elements have increased, and so is the quality. Quality has become better. Okay, almost all location, ideally it is preferred to be a rectangular if it is a quad element, But since the number of elements are more, so distortion is not seen. Probably all looks good. Let me check the quality, and if there is a quality index, see here. So almost there is no red color, but again there is still some problem because of the definition of the surface. This yellow color basically it shows the aspect ratio, 9 elements having a higher aspect ratio. So if you instead of quad, okay, and if somebody you will take, let's say display, so I'll delete, and somebody let's say you just triangular element is preferred, okay. A final triangular element will give a much better quality initially if the geometry definition is so see it's almost uniform everywhere, okay, except because of this certain elements are bad, but almost you will get a better. But this is not the way. This kind of meshing is only for initial simulation to check whether which is a critical region, as I said in the image. So in the first run, you don't worry about all these things. Okay, and do the simulation. Now in the second stage, when we will come back, okay. So what you do, you can say the surfaces that let's say only this element, this surface having let's say element size of 2, for example, you can assign. Okay, these surfaces I'm just showing arbitrary element size, but again you can take a later grid dimensions. This should be of 4, okay, and everywhere or let me, I'll not assign only this. So I will say that only the core region will be 2, rest will be the with a higher mesh, okay. So if you do the meshing, so this is called a mesh where I have refined near the only near the region where having higher flows. You can see the mesh is uniform, but again I have kept mesh here a very coarse mesh, thinking that my flow is not dominant here, is mostly in the dominant. But still this is not the again the proper way to do meshing is because there are regions on the near the wall which you show higher velocity. So what I'll do is again you will have to just abort it or just simply delete it, okay, and again come back of your change meshing strategy. So since this is near the elements near the wall, so I will say okay, let this be of 1 element size, okay. This element or the elements near the wall should be 1, okay, and element this near should be wall should be let's say of 5, okay, and these 2 again I'll keep it as it is. Come back, okay, and instead of mix, let's say if you only use tria and select, then what will happen is because I'm using a different mesh size, now you can see. So though my walls are refined here, but still ideally you should put an inflation layer here near the wall. So all along the wall you no need to put such a fine mesh, so only the small region you need to do. But still you can see this region is not well defined. So in the next or the maybe you are experienced enough, so you can select this line, because along this line we saw the high gradient. So only you take the line, okay, and further you can refine. And once you reach a certain level of mesh, then you should go for the grid independence. Okay, the first thing you should do is basically we do grid independent test. for any simple problem or any for a given boundary condition, go for monitoring the values beyond which there will not be change, number one. And once your grid independence is done, then you go for validation, because you never know whether the model which you are using is actually is correct or not. So for that purpose, we either go for validating with the either published result in literature, or go for some your own experiment or experiment done reported by somebody else. So even if you can be, let's say for turbulent flow, generally it is for 10 to 15%, or sometimes in some cases 20% variation is also allowed. For a laminar flow, below maybe around 5 to 10% variations are considered well posed with this CFD. So once you do the validation and the grid independent, two basic things, then next you can go for your own research or doing further design modifications and further iterations using the same model. But moment your physics changes, for example, you introduce melting. For example, in a given problem, you have validated your result with let's say simple flow, a heat transfer, but you are modeling a problem of, let's say, melting. So that is not the then you have to go validate the model again with the similar physics. Then it will bring some authenticity to your model. Okay, so there are other way also. I think time is already over. So I had the other way. There are many things I wanted to cover, but I think I have mostly given you a broad idea of what you should be taking care of when you do the CFD model development. Okay, so with this I will stop. I'll now invite some questions. Anybody from audience they would like to ask? So any questions? So I have the timetable sent by the organizer, and the contents are really good. So the participant should spend some time in listening to the topics, and they have sent actually in my PDF. It has already some time is not visible. It seems the area is cropped somewhere else. So I request organizer to resend me the PDF file so that I also can sometime select a topic and attend. So any question, audience? Or I hope it has helped in some way to knowing the basics of CFD. So anybody? So I hope it is clear. So thank you. So now I hand over the session to the organizer. So,
Thank you, sir. I will share that detailed schedule again. Thank you so much for the presentation on mass generation method. Was really engaging, and it is very helpful for the understanding of different method of production, or we can say that effect of design on cost as well. You have beautifully covered that fundamentals in a fluid flow with a very well example. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. On behalf of ADIT, again, I thank you to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So so if no further question, so audience can contact me anytime. I have email ID is there, my phone number is there. Just in case you stuck somewhere else or some guidance is needed, do contact me for any.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next session will start at 11:45. Okay, so you can take your break and please join back.